Welcome, everyone. Ohayou gozaimasu. This is American History video number 3, The New Deal. It's Mr. Levy, and I'm very excited to be here. Despite the greeting, it is not the morning. It is actually late at night, but I have a lot of coffee in me, so it's just going to be like my morning classes where I have a lot of coffee in me there as well. Um, this video is about the New Deal and America's response to the Great Depression. And up on our screen right now is a major player in our story, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd president, and one of his most famous quotes: "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So really quickly, let's just refresh our memory about what was going wrong in 1933. So as we learned before, banks and businesses were failing and going under in record numbers in the United States since the crash in 1929. Unemployment was skyrocketing, farms were failing, and not only that, you had one of the worst ecological disasters in our history. The Dust Bowl had been going on since, for 3 years. And here we have an image of a wave of dust about to, cover a small group of buildings. And that's kind of a metaphor for how Americans were feeling at this time. So into this situation step two people, Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. Now I'm going to talk to a little bit about who they were very quickly before we get to what they did during this time. So Franklin and Eleanor were both from upper class families from the East Coast. They were actually very distant cousins. Um, Franklin Roosevelt was described as, a very optimistic, charismatic, good communicator. He was a really outgoing guy that people really liked and trusted. Um, Eleanor, on the other hand, was considered very serious, intelligent, and rather shy young woman, but she was very committed to many social causes. Working really hard to try and correct some of the things that she saw around her that she felt was wrong. So, at any rate, these two get married young after he's had a career in the Navy, among other things, and he decides to run for office, becoming the governor of New York. And during that time in his 20s, FDR is hit with polio. It's a very serious disease that he struggles and fights very hard to overcome, but he does lose complete use of his legs for the rest of his life. Um, so this is pointed out because a lot of people look to FDR's struggle against polio as the thing that kind of defined much of his character. While he was really optimistic, he was a fighter, and he chose to overcome challenges as he did in his younger days throughout his entire career, rather than let those challenges take him down. The reason that I'm saying here that together they served 3 terms from 1933 to 1945 is because, though obviously it was Franklin Roosevelt that was elected as president for 3 terms during that time, but you cannot understate how important Eleanor Roosevelt was to his political career. She was, he would say, his eyes and ears. She would travel all around the country and the world, seeing and looking and making judgments about what was going on. And she would bring that information back to him and help him decide how to craft policy and make decisions as president. And they were truly a team. And she was the person, the first wife of the president, the first lady to take a real active role in the activities of the day. And from her, since she did this, we've had other first ladies who have taken a similarly active role. Women like Nancy Reagan, or more recently, Michelle Obama. So I just want to emphasize that both of them were really critical to how the New Deal shaped up over the course of the Depression. So let's move on from there. So What was the New Deal? In a nutshell, the New Deal was FDR's plan to end the Great Depression. Um, Obviously, he was elected after Herbert Hoover. He came in 1933 and he immediately set to work to try to get Americans the jobs they needed, get American businesses the money they needed, and change programs that had failed during the Depression to try and lift the country out of its bad situation. How did he do it? Well, the New Deal was the plan that he promised that basically had three parts. And I'll describe each part and give examples of how he tried to do it. The first were a series of programs focused on relief. This was just helping Americans in need. Americans needed jobs, they needed money, and they needed food. And there were programs across like many different types that served to get exactly that: food to Americans, money to Americans that need it, and jobs. I've listed just three here, but and there were many more, but these three were very impactful. So I'll go through them very quickly. The first was the Civilian Conservation Corps. And this was created in 1933, the CCC, and it provided jobs for young unemployed men from 18 to 25. And basically, what it did is it had them move out to forests and mountains all around the country and do conservation work. They might dig new trails or dig fire breaks or plant trees or do other work to help conservation's efforts to protect our forests. They dressed like soldiers, lived in barracks, and they were required to send all their money home to their families. It was an amazingly impactful program. And in fact, a lot of the trails in the mountains and the areas around us here in Tucson were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. Another really important program was the Work Progress Administration, the WPA, and it created a lot of public works projects. So these were like building projects that created jobs. So they would go out and build bridges, buildings, streets, you name it. And again, you see a lot of WPA projects right here in Tucson. The swimming pool at Himmel Park, the sidewalks downtown, a lot of the buildings at the U of A, like Centennial Hall, all built by the WPA. Another important program was the Social Security Act. This created pensions for retirees, or basically, it ensured that when somebody turned 65, they would receive a check from the government every month to make sure they did not go hungry or lose their homes. And this was of great comfort to a lot of older Americans who were afraid that in the Depression, once they couldn't work anymore, they were just completely going to be forgotten. It also gave unemployment benefits. If somebody lost their job, they could get money until they found a new one. These two types of benefits are still with us today. So again, these are only three programs. There were many more relief programs under the New Deal. The next approach were reform programs. So these were programs made to change American institutions to ensure we would never have another depression. So again, these are just three examples. There were many more, but three examples are the Emergency Banking Act. So Roosevelt put this into place in the first week after he took office. It essentially allowed the federal government to reorganize and strengthen banks to give Americans confidence that they would not fail. He also created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC. This ensured that the deposits people put in banks would be backed up by the federal government. So if the bank collapsed and somebody had their savings in the bank, the federal government would promise to pay them that money back. These were both done to reestablish confidence in the banks, and it worked. Within a very short time, within 1 year, Americans put money back into the banks up to $1 billion. And in fact, the FDIC still is with us today. So the next time you walk into a bank, not sure when that may be, but the next time you walk into a bank, you will see a sticker on the front door that says FDIC, that tells us that your deposit and your money are insured by the federal government. Also, the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed, and this established minimum wage and overtime for many workers, realizing the goals of those progressive efforts that we learned about before. So again, three examples of reform programs under the New Deal. There were many others. The third approach that the New Deal took, that Roosevelt took in the New Deal to try and get the country out of its bad situation, were recovery programs. These were programs aimed at helping the economy get on the right track. One example is the Agricultural Adjustment Administration to help get money and programs to farmers, the National Industry Recovery Act, and this encouraged businesses to cooperate to set reasonable prices and profits. The Tennessee Valley Authority, this was a hugely impactful program that created projects across Southeast America to redirect rivers, create electricity, and reduce flooding. So not only did this create jobs, but it created lots of business around these projects. And as you see this picture in front of you, this is a hydroelectric dam built under the Tennessee Valley Authority. And if you can imagine that project, it completely changed the geography of the parts of the South. It literally moved rivers and created lakes. And so a lot of the America we know today was made during this period of the New Deal. All right, so those are a description of the programs. What was life like during the New Deal? So I think in general, it's a fair statement to say that the New Deal gave hope to many Americans. And that was something that they really needed during the Great Depression. It got them jobs. It got them a sense of pride because people were working and they had money and food. They didn't have to worry about it. And it gave them a sense that Americans and the country had their interests in mind. President Roosevelt was would host a weekly radio broadcast called Fireside Chats, where he would basically talk to Americans to try and reassure them that the country was moving in the right direction and the government had their interests in mind. So the New Deal was successful in giving a lot of Americans hope when they really needed it. It also brought a lot of Americans together that would never have interacted together before. Young men from all around the country were brought together to work for the Civilian Conservation Corps. Women and others were brought together on other programs to, like the WPA, to create new projects. A lot of women took on new jobs, including Roosevelt hired a Secretary of Labor, the first female Secretary of Labor, who was the first woman to ever serve in a cabinet position. And she was hugely influential, helping craft things like the Social Security Act. So you had women in a lot of new roles. You also had a lot of new artistic developments because a lot of the New Deal programs were aimed at helping artists, musicians, playwrights, writers, painters, by giving them money to create art and music, etc., to motivate Americans to feel hopeful and to work. So, it really brought Americans together in a lot of different ways and really changed things. But it wasn't all rosy. A lot of the changes that were made weren't equal. So a lot of the discrimination against African Americans or Latino Americans or against women in the workplace, it was still there. It didn't completely change. And despite the efforts that Eleanor Roosevelt made to try and push a lot of these issues further, President Roosevelt felt that he couldn't always push for those things like greater equality in the workplace, et cetera, because there was a lot of opposition from Southern Democrats in Congress against those activities. So it was a balance. It didn't work for everyone, but it worked for some. Were there problems with the New Deal? You bet. And again, it's super complicated, so we can't get into the too many details, but I'll just say that some progressives on the left felt that it still left too much power in the hands of the rich, in the hands of the bank, and in the hands of the government, and that workers and regular people still didn't have as much power as they would want. It wasn't dramatic or radical enough for some progressives. On the other hand, some conservatives thought it was far too impactful. In fact, that the government was out of bounds and interfering too much in Americans' daily lives. It was telling businesses how they could run their shops. It was trying to set and control prices, set and control pay, things like that, that they felt by the Constitution should be left up to the individuals. So these were two general critiques of the New Deal from both sides. And FDR made mistakes during his 3 terms. At one point during the beginning of his 3rd term, he tried to pack the court, meaning he tried to create 6 new Supreme Court positions and a lot of new federal judgeships that he could then fill with judges that were friendly to his position. And a lot of people saw that as a power play that would make the president much stronger. And they thought that was wrong and he had to back off. That was a big loss for him. In the end, did the New Deal work? It's a good question. Historians don't agree. There's a lot of arguments about that to this day. It's one of those questions that, some people say that America was right on track to get out of the Depression, pull itself out. There were good things. It was trending in the right direction. Other people say that no, the only thing that got us out of the Depression was the start of World War II. And that is what really redirected Americans' attention and got us out of the Depression. So this is something that, like all things in history, you need to do some research and expand your understanding and come up with the conclusion for yourself. So with that in mind, let's get to work in the spirit of the New Deal. So here's assignment number 5, and you got 2 options. I'll explain them both. So the first one is, I'd like you to go online and research any New Deal program. You go in and Google New Deal programs, and you'll come up with a list of all these programs. Some I mentioned, some I haven't. Choose one, read about it, do a little research, then describe the program's objectives. What was the program? What was it trying to do? And tell me if it was relief, reform, or a recovery program. Now, some of these aren't easy to describe. If they were just relief or just recovery, some of them are more than one. And if you've forgotten what relief, reform, and recovery were, go back and review the video or figure that out during your research. Provide one example of the program in action. And what I mean by that is describe something specific. A bridge that was built, a building that was built, jobs that were created, tell me what they were doing and where. Give me a description of some art that was made, a famous mural and what it showed. Give me something descriptive and describe it, or specific and describe it. And then the last thing, that shouldn't take you too long, but I'd like you to spend some time thinking about and answering the following question. So given our current economic crisis, do you think America will need a New Deal for today? Why or why not? What programs do you think might be beneficial and why? So, given that we are right now facing the greatest economic crisis since the Great Depression, I'd like you to think about, do you think we might be facing a situation where we need programs like the New Deal? Why and which ones? Why do you think they may work? So put some time and effort into answering that question. Write it up, send it to me and get it to me in the usual ways, and we'll go from there. Now, for those of you that might want to try something different, here's option 2. So I'm going to try showing you a website, and I'm going to walk through it, and I'm going to go over the assignment, and then I'll come back to this page. But bear with me for 1 sec. So if you go to Google and you Google the Living New Deal, it will take you to this website. And what this website is it's something dedicated to the history of the New Deal. If you go here and you go to New Deal sites, you go to projects by state and city, you scroll down to Arizona, you go to find all projects in one city, and you choose the best city in Arizona, and I am not biased, Tucson. You will get a list of all the New Deal projects in our fair city, what they were, what they looked like. You get a cool description and a picture, who built it, when, where, and why. Sabino Canyon Recreation Area, all the roads and dams in Sabino Canyon, yep, built during the New Deal. So scroll through here and you will find the information you need to answer those questions. And I'll go back and describe that in a little more detail. You also have a complete description of all the New Deal programs, New Deal timelines, etc. You also have a pretty cool thing called New Deal Smiles, which are pictures of individuals working on these programs. I actually used a few of these in the PowerPoint, so you might recognize them. But it's a really great resource to learn more about this critical part of our history. So back to where we left off. Here's the description I just went through to how to get to the site, where to find the information. You just answer the same questions from the first option number one, same deal. It's just all Tucson based, but I do want you to answer the short answer, the question at the end. Now, are you excited about extra credit? Of course you are. Do you want to do some? You bet you do. You always do, guys. I know this about you. So, for those of you who are interested, let me know. What I'd like you to do is just throw together a PowerPoint slide illustrating what you learned answering the questions that were laid out. So, give me a description of the project, give me some pictures of the project here in Tucson, was it relief reform, etc., maybe some descriptions. For those of you who want to do this, I am going to put a challenge out to you that I will throw together a Zoom meeting for all our juniors in American history, and you can present your PowerPoint to them. I know that Diego, Isla, and Isla are already on board from period 4, so I'm throwing down the gauntlet for periods 1 and period 3 to see if anyone wants to step up and do it for you guys. Hasi, Randy, Gabriel, looking at you guys, people. So let's jump on board and get it done. That's all I got. That's it for today. I hope you have a good one, and I really look forward to talking to you soon. Take care. Be safe.